Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez and you are listening to episode number 603. On this episode, I talk about two different things that are not necessarily related, but they are because I'm a geek and I'm a nerd and I love different things. I talk about the new Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom that was released on Netflix. It's the third and final part of the trilogy of War for Cybertron. I talk about what I like, what I don't like, and I do a deep dive as far as Transformers history and lore, and even make some recommendations. So I hope you can take the ride with me on that one. It's a very interesting one. I was not expecting to go as deep as I did, but hey, that's what part of the show is, just improving and going off the top of my head. The other thing I talk about is the current lawsuit that's playing out between Scarlett Johansson and Disney. Scarlett Johansson was recently in Black Widow from Rooster Teeth Studios, which is under the Disney banner, and Disney released the movie because they thought it'd be a good idea. Day and date, which means they released it in theaters, but they also released it on their streaming platform, Disney Plus, for an extra $30 through their Premier Access option. And they're fighting over money, is really what it comes down to. Scarlett Johansson believes she's owed a certain amount, and Disney's like, well, we paid you a certain amount, and now they're fighting. Whether this gets settled behind closed doors or plays out in the law system, or in the courts, I should say, we'll have to wait and see. And I get into a whole bunch of that, and I give you some, I guess I play devil's advocate in a sense, because I give you what, I'm sure what she was hoping for, what the studio thought that they were doing, and we'll see how it all culminates. But before we get into all that stuff, let's do the usual intro. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find the show under the podcast section. You can also find the show over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show there. Like us as well. Notifications, the bell, whatever you do. I mean, if you like, I don't know. If you're on iTunes, subscribe to the show, rate us, comment, let us know what you think. Facebook fan page, on Twitter at Rabblecast, email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Send me your thoughts. I mean, especially as far as what's going on between Scarlett Johansson and Disney, or if your thoughts on the Transformers series on Netflix. And if you have anything else, if you have stories, news, tips, ideas, suggestions, let me know what you're thinking, because this is still an ever-evolving show, and I would love to get some feedback and let know what's going on. I've gotten a few emails here and there from people who have been happy to say that hey, look, the show is back. Yes, I'm getting back to it. I'm trying to put the shoes. Yes, I'm trying to put the shoes back on. I'm trying to get the shows back out on a regular basis, and I'm trying. We'll see how it all plays out as we go forward. So besides that, I'm rambling again. Email us, hit us at the usual social links, social media, and get the show, share it, have fun, listen to it. That's what I'm doing it for. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Let's settle in. Let's sit down. Let's talk about some stuff. Some streaming news, some movie news in general. Let's just get right down to it. I'm just checking my levels, making sure things aren't too crazy. I think I'm good. Okay. Last episode, I briefly touched upon, as I was talking about Masters of the Universe for Netflix from Mattel Television, and I believe it was Powerhouse Animation Studios, that there was a new Transformers also available on Netflix. And I'm grateful that there's a new Transformers. It's fun. It was told as a 3-part story. Unfortunately, it fell short in my expectations. Not overall. I mean, again, like, I'm happy that you had to see all the G1 Transformers come back. A lot of the story was repurposed and retold to fit this new story arc, but I was hoping for something a little bit different. I got something vastly different, and in a lot of aspects I was very happy to see it, but them trying to change the media to make it a 3D CGI animation was fun at first. I think the gimmick kind of wore off after a little bit, especially since the animation was a little off in some cases. Like if you see Optimus Prime when he's walking or when he turns, his midsection for some reason or another is very malleable. It wobbles and moves. So I mean, I'm not gonna harp on things that there's no reason on nitpicking all the little things, but it's hard to do that kind of a show when a lot of the voice acting is very iconic from the old ones from Generation 1. Now, there's been many different iterations of Transformers over the years. Don't get me wrong, that's great. It's been a lot of fun, but Peter Cullen, Frank Welker, and any number of the other voice actors from G1 era, it's kind of hard to hit that mark again with new actors, but in certain cases they did. Like, Megatron was okay. The new Optimus was hit or miss, depending on who you are. Bumblebee is always fun to see him when he speaks, not just a radio speaking for him. Starscream, who was voiced by Chris Latta in the original cartoons, that's a voice that you're just not going to hit again. Let's just face it. Starscream for the Transformers, Cobra Commander in G.I. Joe, that's just a voice that you're never going to be able to recreate. It's almost dishonorable even if you attempt to hit that same pitch, that same cadence. It was great while we had it. Unfortunately, he has long since passed away. Very unfortunate, and that voice just exists in the G1 era or pathos, whatever you want to refer to it as. I'm not gonna sit there and harp on that one. Overall, it's fun to have a new Transformers. I watched all 3 parts. War for Cybertron. I can't remember the first one off the top of my head, but then it was Earthrise and then Kingdom. And it was great because they finally, in the 3rd part, they finally got to where the story really came together. Initially what happened is they show the battle between Autobots and Decepticons. And spoilers if you haven't seen this on Netflix, please go check it out. Like I said, the story really comes together in the 3rd part. I know a lot of people is like, oh, well, I don't have to watch 3 parts just to get the story. I get it. It's a long burn, but I think it's worth it in the end if you're a Transformers fan. If you're a casual fan, it might be a little bit harder to get through it, but it's definitely worth it for Transformers fans. So initially, there's a fight between Decepticons and Autobots. Autobots are on the losing side. Megatron is pretty much Emperor Megatron over Cybertron. They have to get away from Cybertron with the Allspark. They actually bring in the Allspark now and the Autobot Matrix, which was really interesting. They kill off certain characters, which I didn't think they were going to die that early in the storyline, which was really interesting. I'm not going to spoil those parts. But the ultimate idea of them having to get away, they reveal the Titans. So you see Omega Supreme and some of the other lore. You see Alpha Trion on Cybertron. But then ultimately they have to get away from their home world. And I thought they were going to do the storyline of them crash landing on Earth and being buried in the volcano and the Decepticons being buried in the ocean, and then millions of years pass by and they are on modern day Earth, or maybe even Earth back in the 80s like the original cartoon was. No, they did something weird where they have to go in space and then they travel through the dead universe, and we meet some other characters. We see Galvatron, we see Skylinks, and a few other characters as well. I believe it was it Scorponok? I'm blanking off the top of my head now. But we get to see other characters in different roles. They weren't the typical characters from the G1 roles back in the day. And that's saying quite a bit, because a lot of the characters that popped up in G2 were just, hey, look, new toy. Let's just introduce a character in Generation 2 and go from there. Generation 1 had the same thing. I should say Season 2 of Generation 1 and G2, whatever the case was. Other characters just came on screen with little to no discussion or introduction. There was just a new character, and you were just, okay, this is now part of the toy line. Another reason for the kids to go out and buy another toy, or at least ask mommy and daddy, hey, can I get that from Toys R Us? Whatever the case. The second part of the storyline really left me wanting more, which is good, because it made me curious for part 3. But the idea of them going through the whole dead universe, introducing this other realm, more or less, where you have to learn what needs to be done with the Allspark and with the Matrix, that got a little weird. I should mention the Autobot Matrix is the collection of all the wisdom of the Primes. So every former leader of the Autobots, their essence is essentially absorbed into the Autobot Matrix, and the idea is that will help. At least in the old cartoons, it was said to light your darkest hour. So when things were at their bleakest, that's when it would open, or at least offer its wisdom to you and change the tide of whatever catastrophe or disaster was happening at the time. It happened in the 1986 movie where the Transformers as a whole were fighting against Unicron out in the orbit of Cybertron, and it was used to destroy Unicron because it's supposedly the only thing that can destroy this planet-devouring Transformer, which was considered one of the ancients. It was Unicron and Primus, which years later they actually retconned the story quite a few times. Actually, it's hard to follow the lore. It depends if you're following the comics, the different animated, or the original cartoons. I see different animated because there was storylines in Japan, there were storylines, or at least comic book lines, in the UK, and all of them had different ideas, different narratives. Some of them were brought together in what was called the aligned continuity. If you want any deep dives on any of these, I highly recommend a gentleman online by the name of Chris, I believe McFeely. He does what's called the basics on Transformers, and he spotlights sometimes groups like the Wreckers or the Insecticons, Constructicons, stuff like that, Combiners, or he'll pick individual characters, and he'll do anywhere from probably an 8 to 15-minute video, and he gives you the history, the rundown of all these different characters, and it's really, really worth it. If you're a diehard Transformer fan, check him out. I believe it's Chris McFeely, and you just get, well, first off, he has a wonderful European accent, so when he goes through, it's just wonderful to hear him speak. It sounds more educated. He gives you the breakdown of all the different characters, what they've meant in the toy line, the cartoon, the comics, merchandising, all the different iterations he refers to. He'll even show you some of the different toys that are released throughout the years and gives you a better idea. Talks about some of the collector's exclusives. It's something I look forward to every Saturday morning, is usually when he releases them. I'll get up, I start taking care of the kids, and I'll look over, and there's a new basics on, Megatron, or actually no, his Megatron video is coming up real soon. So basics on Starscream, basics on Optimus, basics on the Dinobots and stuff like that. They'll go through and he'll give you the rundown of the different characters. So if you want more lore and deep dive, check that out. Unicron, Primus are essentially good and evil when it comes to the world of Transformers. Primus was retconned that he was at one point transformed into the planet of Cybertron and locked in that form. So that was the planet of Cybertron. But every time you see Cybertron in these storylines, it's always dying or being drained of energy, and they're trying to find a way to revitalize it in some shape or form. That's not here, that's much later. In the 86 cartoon, Unicron just has this hatred of Cybertron that he's going to use the Transformers, the very beings that live on it, to carry out his bidding and allow him a path to destroy Cybertron. That's where the 1986 Transformers, the animated movie, culminates, where Unicron is brought in. They introduce this storyline of the last battle between the Autobots and Decepticons. A lot of people are injured, or if not killed off. We'll see the destroying of childhood dreams as far as Optimus is concerned, because that's the first time we realized in the 1986 movie that a Transformer can die. There is this scene where, in the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, where the Autobots are making a resource run back to Earth from one of the moons of Cybertron, and Megatron grabs his troops, jumps on board the ship of the Autobots, and just starts laying waste to the different Autobots. Prowl, Ratchet, Ironhide gets it the worst, gets his head blown straight off. Again, if you haven't seen the 1986 movie, spoilers. But at the same time, check it out, because it's very, very prominent spot as far as the lore of Transformers overall. And I only mention this because if you're a Transformers fan, you've watched it, you appreciate what was done then. Maybe it might give you some backstory and color as far as what the modern version on Netflix tried for the War for Cybertron trilogy. But essentially what it comes down to is big battle, Autobot City. You think that's finally going to be it. You're going to see the end of the battle between Autobots and Decepticons, the end between good and evil. Optimus dies trying to save one of his troops. All the Decepticons are injured, if not dying. Prime dies, gives the Autobot Matrix over to Ultra Magnus, who we thought was going to be the next leader, but it actually, the Matrix, as it's being passed, first touches Hot Rod, who then goes on to become Rodimus Prime later in the movie through different trials and tribulations. Hot Rod is voiced by Judd Nelson in the movie, and Robert Stack from Caddyshack and the Unsolved Mystery series. Check those out as well. Great voices. Well, it's unfortunate they only were used for the movie, but whatever contracts and pay rates were. Unicron in this point finds the drifting Decepticons after they've been essentially just tossed out the side of Astro Train as they're going back home. They're considered garbage. They need the light and the load so they can get back to their home planet. Otherwise, they're going to run out of energy themselves. Megatron and a number of other Decepticons are found by Unicron, and he reformats them into their new modes, their new characters. So, let's see. You get Cyclonus, you get Scourge and his sweeps, a number of other characters, and you also get Megatron as Galvatron. Now, in the cartoons, you never saw Galvatron and Megatron meet. I say this because in the third part of the War for Cybertron series, Kingdom, you get not only Megatron and Galvatron coming face to face at one point near the end of the storyline. Again, spoilers. But because of this storyline and the way it plays out, we get a little bit of a time jump. So we see the Autobots and Decepticons crash land on prehistoric Earth, and they find the Beast Wars characters. So we see Optimus Primal, we see another iteration of Megatron as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and we have three different versions because we also have Galvatron, which is a version of Megatron. So we have Megatron G1, Megatron Beast Wars, and Galvatron from G2. And then you also have Optimus Primal from Beast Wars, and then later you see Nemesis Prime, which is the dark version of Optimus. Now, it's explained that Galvatron and Nemesis Prime come from timelines where things just went horribly bad, and Unicron essentially has slaved over them, or enslaved them, I should say, and forced them to do his bidding. So they want to prevent their timelines because they don't want things to go the way that it has for them. But at the same time, Optimus and Megatron are like, no, we make our own fate. We're not going to say this is predestined, and they have to come together at one point. It's very interesting. My problem with the whole storyline is this was billed as a 3-part series, and as you watch, they end it, and it's open-ended for another part or another series. So I don't know if it hasn't been announced yet if Netflix is going to pick up another one. I do know that there's going to be another series apparently in the works. So hopefully it's a continuation. Hopefully we have a better idea of what's going to happen as far as that open narrative. But I was just like, what the fuck? I was hoping for a satisfying ending to the whole thing. It's like, the best I can describe it is when I played the Halo franchise on the Xbox. Now I know that they're never going to let it die. They're going to keep going. They want to pump as much revenue out of the IP as possible. But as I played the third Halo game, they build that sucker as the end of the battle, finish the fight, and you're going to get to see a spectacular ending, a finale that you were prepping for years on end at this point if you were playing the Halo series. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the game and it leaves it open. Master Chief is drifting out in space, and he will be called upon again when things go horribly wrong. She's like, what the fuck? You want closure. You want something to finish. And I wasn't as upset by this one, but I was mystified by their decision to leave it open-ended. I thought they were going to have a little bit more closure to the story, but again, it's an IP that they're licensing from Hasbro. Hasbro themselves have allowed the Transformers to be recreated, reimagined in various different iterations. We've seen versions over in Japan, we've seen versions here in America, we've even seen the movies with Michael Bay making his, what was that, like 4 or 5 Transformers movies. Now they're going to be making a Beast Wars Transformers movie coming out soon, which they announced that Ron Perlman will be attached as one of the voice actors for Optimus Primal, so I'm actually looking forward to that one. Very interesting to hear his voice coming out one of those creations. But the Michael Bay versions were love it or leave it. That's really what it came down to. First one was okay. It introduced these new versions of them. They look very little like their G1 counterparts, but again, I get it. It's for the movies. They wanted to go for a different look, different style. Hasbro did a very smart thing when they were making the movies, where they pretty much said, hey, Michael Bay, here's your movie. You can make what you want. So they're licensing all the different cars and all the makers, whatever. You can make your Michael Bay presents Transformers kind of thing. So it was referred to as the Bayverse by loyal fans. And G1 was held back. So, like, this is ours. We're going to hold on to this. This is very precious to us and to our fans and to our stockholders. But we want to make sure that these are not touched in any way that would tarnish the history or the reputation of. So make what you're going to make. That's fine. Your movies are exciting and fun, and lots of explosions and 360 camera pans and car chases. You do that. Have fun at it. And he did. He made millions of dollars with that. Considering that he said he never would do a toy movie in his life, and he latched on to one of the highest grossing ones. Good for him. Good for Hasbro. For the G1 fans, maybe not so much, but let's face it, the newer movies were not made for G1 fans necessarily. They were made for the newer audience, the newer kids who are going to get infatuated with them. So with that said, the Bayverse has its own following, but also has its own detractors. And again, I'm not going to sit here and shit on it. It's not my particular favorite. Again, after the first one, things kind of went south, but it was also hampered by a writer's strike. So the second movie didn't have a finished script, but they started shooting anyway, and they started pretty much they just threw whatever they could at the wall and saw what stuck. And unfortunately, a lot of it wasn't the greatest. Some was fun, but you also have the idea of the story of the Transformers themselves, and then you're trying to do the human story that kind of coincides in a sense. I don't know. It's always kind of weird when you have giant robotic or giant creatures, and you're trying to do like a human story that goes side by side with it and try to make it go hand in hand. It doesn't always match up. In this case, again, hit or miss, loved or hate it. A lot of people didn't like it, but it did go on to make a lot of money. Maybe not necessarily here in the States. It did well in the States, but also overseas, it did fantastically. So again, some people like it, some people don't, whatever the case is. As far as the series on Netflix, I was appreciating it. They made as best as an attempt as they could. Some story threads were left unanswered. Other ones, again, you're probably going to see some of this stuff come to light later on, because the idea is you have the Allspark. I think I lost this point completely. You have the Allspark and you have the Matrix. So the Matrix I had mentioned is the collection of all the wisdom. The Allspark is supposed to be the creation of all life, so it's like a never-ending source of power. When Optimus removes it from Cybertron, now the battle is to get it back to Cybertron, because without it, their world is dying. So that becomes the battle, and that becomes the point of Galvatron and Nemesis trying to stop that from happening, trying to make sure that their timelines, it's kind of weird when you look at it. They want it to exist or don't want it to exist, because if they have it exist, if they make Prime and Optimus make the choices that they do exist, but they're going to be creations of Unicron, so they have to find a way to stop Unicron if that's the case. So again, it leaves it open-ended. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like, it doesn't matter if they save Cybertron, the dark versions of them will find a way to come back and find a way to break free of their master of Unicron. So it's left open. I want more of a closure for that one, so we'll see how that one turns out. Again, a little confusing, a little open-ended as far as what, more so than what I thought. I enjoyed it. I'm going to watch it again just so I can see if I can pick up on some things that I left off or I might have missed. So at one point you see, again, Starscream meets up with other characters. You see Dinobot from the Beast Wars, not the Dinobots. That's a group of dinosaur transformers. I feel like I'm losing everybody. But the Dinobots, or the dinosaurs from the G1 cartoon, Dinobot was a raptor transformer that was a Predacon, one of the bad guys in Beast Wars. If you watch it, it makes a lot more sense, but it becomes like a lot of backstabbing and traitors and intrigue as they go through the storyline, as they're trying to save the Matrix and the Allspark itself. In fact, if you go back and watch the original Beast Wars cartoon, the original Beast Wars animated, Dinobot has one of the best storylines, and I think it was in their last season, he has an episode where he essentially, after turning on the Predacons for so long and joining with the Maximals, he goes back and says, I've had it, I'm going to take on my old team and stop them from their battle. And he damn near does it, but he also sacrifices himself in the line of duty, and it's a fantastic episode itself. Check it out. You trust me, it's a lot of fun to watch. That being said, I'm going to leave the Transformer talk alone for now. It was fun, like I said. If you're a Transformers fan, it's worth a watch. If you're a casual fan, you might get lost in some of the lore, but it's definitely fun to check it out. As I was mentioning with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, I kind of wish they held on to the G1 animation style, but the 3D CG is fun to watch, especially so you can see the transformations are cool, the sounds are there, the battles there, the voice acting talents are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, I'm used to the G1 voices for this property, where I wasn't so much with He-Man. I was willing to trade out the newer for the old, but the new voice cast does a fantastic job with the series. It's just that there are certain iconic voices you just can't replace. Let's face it. Like I said, Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, I was about to mix them up, Optimus and Megatron respectively, are fantastic, and in my mind, in my eyes, should continue to voice those characters until they can no longer do it themselves. But that's just me. Check it out. Have fun. That's the Netflix side of things. I do want to touch upon the recent news between Disney and Black Widow. And I mention this because this is a very tricky situation for Disney, because the lawsuit brought forward by Scarlett Johansson, it's gotten kind of nasty in a sense, but it's also very probable that it could set a precedent if she's able to make it stick, which means actually win in court and not settle out of court quietly and confidentially. So Black Widow came out day and date, which means it came out in the theaters, it had its release, but it also was released on Disney Plus, Disney streaming service, which is fantastic for somebody like me who wants to go watch it, but I have kids, so I don't want to take them to the theater just yet, because I'm playing it safe, just want to make sure so far, as far as going out into public and being around a lot of people that we just don't know, and let's err on the side of caution, let's face it. Our choice. So because of that, we stayed home, we watched it, had a fun time doing it, enjoyed the movie immensely, but because of the sudden drop-off in its second week, it's not seeing the numbers that it would have seen otherwise if it had a regular release, and let's face it, if we were not living in a pandemic. Because of that, the bonuses that were tied to a lot of the different actors' contracts are not being met, which sucks, but it's understandable. That's the way the contract was set up. So she is suing for money that is potentially lost, because I don't think she's going to see the different milestones hit as per her contract. So the extra money that she was going to get paid out that she stood to make, and who knows how much that really is. I don't know the fine print of her contract, but I would imagine there's quite a few millions that she's losing because of this, because she thought originally all these Marvel movies make, bank at the theater. There's no way that she's not going to hit these bonuses. Well, nobody foresaw our current state of affairs. With that said, Disney fired back, getting upset, saying that her callous response to the pandemic and that she has already been paid $20 million. Okay, let's go back and mention that Robert Downey Jr. was paid, I believe, $75 million for either Endgame or Infinity War. So there's a huge difference right there as far as pay, especially considering that Scarlett Johansson's been, along with the rest of the Marvel actors and characters universe, have been helping build these stories for quite some time now. Robert Downey Jr., I'm not saying that Scarlett Johansson is a better actor than Robert Downey Jr. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's a certain pay scale that was kind of left open. And again, they didn't expect these to grow as big as they did. I'm sure they're thankful that it did, and they were willing to reward certain people along the way. But for them to say she's already been paid $20 million, not cool to reveal what she was actually paid as you're trying to take a jab at her publicly. That's dirty pool in my mind. But for her to say, hey, look, I'm suing because I'm losing potential money, that's also, it's kind of a weird thing. But let's face it, everybody was to make this public. Everybody was going to talk about it and make it a big ruckus. So now they're going back and forth. Now, whatever agency is representing Scarlett Johansson has called them out saying, hey, why are you talking about her pay? That's very strange for you to weaponize. They refer to it as weaponizing her pay rate against her. So it gets very dodgy and very tricky how they're going to word things now, because they're going to bring it into it that she's a female actor and she's only been around for so long. She's only had supporting character role. Granted, they've been talking about a Black Widow movie since Avengers back then. They were saying, when is she going to finally get hers? And even though her character had its storyline wrapped up in Infinity War and Endgame, you thought you were going to get a little bit sooner to give her more closure in that sense. Black Widow does that in a very, very good way. It adds layers to her character, so when you go back and watch her from Iron Man 2 all the way up to Endgame, you see her story unravel now, or I should say unfurl, is a better way to put it, and you see the different layers to her character and why she does the things that she does, and how her feelings are better portrayed on screen. That story that was a long time coming maybe took too long to get there, because you had Endgame and Infinity War, which were blockbuster films and made a lot of money at the theater. In fact, Endgame for a while was the top grossing movie, but Avatar came back with a re-release and took that title back. So was it too long for that movie to come out? Again, nobody knew a pandemic was looming and was going to be knocking out films out of theaters literally left and right. The problem with this came down to, there was a year where, almost a year and a half, where we were dealing with the idea of the movies were not going to be released in theaters. Certain studios took steps to renegotiate contracts. HBO Max, Warner Brothers, runs HBO Max, they decided to do day and date for all of 2021, all of their films. So King Kong vs. Godzilla, the new Space Jam, A New Legacy. I'm trying to think of some other movies that just came out. Oh, the new Suicide Squad that just came out in theaters, also on HBO Max. All those were released. And for the most part, there were other cases brought up where they're like, hey, look, my contract specifically says you're going to release this in theaters. What's with the streaming crap? We didn't talk about this. We didn't agree to this. Certain contracts were renegotiated and other payouts were done without renegotiation, saying, hey, look, this is unprecedented. We weren't expecting this, but we want to keep our slate going. When we release our IP, we can't just keep pushing things back. We're going to lose more money. There are people who need to get paid. That was cool with Warner Brothers and the idea of HBO Max, where things were then paid out and the movies were released day and date. Disney did not do that with their Marvel Studios. So a lot of things are now up in the air. There's a new Shang-Chi movie coming out in September, which was at one point talked about being day and date, released in theaters and on Disney+. It has now been changed, so it's only going to be a theater-only release. That's going to be interesting to see what happens. There could be a very, very big drop or very low numbers as far as that's concerned. Another movie that came out day and date was Cruella, the new Disney Plus, or excuse me, the new Disney movie that was released on Disney Plus and theaters. Oh, I should mention another thing. So the difference between HBO Max and Warner Brothers was they were doing day and date. So if you're subscribed to subscribed to HBO Max, you were getting the movies essentially for free streaming for a month while they're released at the same time in the theaters. If you're doing Disney Plus, they're releasing them in theater. If you're a subscriber to Disney Plus, you have to pay an additional $30. So you can get access. They're calling it premiere access to these new movies. So Disney is arguing that even though Scarlett Johansson's not getting her extra money from the box office receipts, she is getting a new revenue stream from the Disney Plus side of things. Let's face it, that's not going to be ongoing as a theater box office receipts would have been. So if you release a movie in the theater, you have potentially 3, maybe 4 months of its release, and the way things go in the current cycle of things. On streaming, you're going to get maybe a month's worth of people buying it and $30 a pop. I mean, let's say $10 per person in the theater. It's a family of 3 or friends, get together, everybody pitches in. You're only going to get so much money out of that. And that was one of the weird things where Disney actually revealed how much money that they were making through the Disney Plus model for Premier Access. I think that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, because you're like, okay, you're getting X amount from the theaters, but you're also going to get this much from the streaming, and it just wasn't adding up. It wasn't getting to the numbers that they were projecting and hoping for originally when this movie was due out last year in 2020. They couldn't push it back any further for fear of it interfering with the other stories that they were being released on Disney Plus. You have WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We just finished up the Loki series. The new What If series is a week away. So they had to start telling these stories. Otherwise, we're going to start having problems with the narrative. Now, that's debatable, I guess you can say. Certain characters appear in certain series, and I think I'd mentioned the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character of Valentina De Fontaine. I can't remember the Lady Hydra is what everybody's referring to it as, and I just for short. Her character was supposed to premiere originally at the end of Black Widow in that one post-credit scene, but because of the delay of Black Widow, her character then appeared in that one scene in Falcon and the Winter Soldier with U.S. Agent and the character of John Walker. So that kind of spoiled, in a sense, her reveal, but it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus from, the Seinfeld days of Elaine and also on Veep. So her ability to act really didn't ruin anything because she's a great actor on screen. So she stole the scene wherever she was. Whatever the case is, it's kind of, let's put it this way, it puts it more on the creatives from Disney to try to make things work if you have to delay something and certain characters are there and certain characters are not. Now that we have the character of Kang, or He Who Shall Remain, at the end of Loki, that character is going to start playing into the new phase in all the different movies in this new phase of MCU movies, or Marvel multiverse movies, whatever they want to refer it to as now. They've pretty much opened up the whole thing as far as new stories and new imaginings. But because of all this, it's going to make a very interesting push back and forth between Scarlett Johansson and Disney. Disney is the parent company, so they can choose whatever they want to do with the properties of Marvel. Kevin Feige, who runs the Marvel Studios, got very upset and was reportedly embarrassed of the way things were being handled and the way things were going back and forth as far as the jabs that were taking at one another. Understandable. You don't want this kind of thing taken into the public light. This is something that could have been discussed behind closed doors. Again, a year and a half, you knew this was going to be a potential problem. Why not sit down with the entertainment lawyers and say, hey, look, this is what we're running into. This is what we want to avoid. This is what we're willing to do. I think that would have been the better idea to try to make things mutually beneficial for all parties involved. That never happened. At least it was never, reported to happen. So whatever comes out of this could set a huge precedent. There was even another story of Emma Stone from Cruella, from the new Cruella movie for Disney. She is now apparently looking into possibly suing as well, because it was the same thing where she had a contract, and most of these contracts say, look, you're going to be in this movie, you're going to do this character, you're going to be top billed, and we're going to do a theater release. So here's potentially how much money you can make from your ticket sales. Well, if those ticket sales don't manifest, that's a lot of money you're missing out on. And I know you're going to say, well, they make millions anyway. Why are they complaining about more money? Hey, look, if you were promised a certain amount of money for something, you're damn well going to want whatever you were promised being paid to you. I don't care if it's $1 million, $1,000, $100,000, whatever the case is. If somebody guarantees that if you do this job, this is what I'm going to pay you, and then suddenly they show up on payday and say, I'm sorry, I can only give you a third of what I'm giving you, or 2/3. You're like, oh, whoa, where's the rest of my money? I did the job. I went out there. I said the lines. I did the things. I did the jumps and the spins and the hoops. Where's my money? But people kind of lose sight of that in a sense, especially when it comes to higher paid actors or performers, because they're like, oh, they have millions anyway, so what are they crying about? I get the idea that you did a job. Where's your pay? Especially if it's by a contract, you're contractually obligated to pay somebody. Again, maybe Disney should have done a little bit more legwork as far as getting that taken care of. Again, Warner Brothers did their best to try to quell whatever discontent was starting to happen with some of their movies that were being released day and date. And again, HBO Max, I mean, we watched Suicide Squad over the weekend. I'll get to that in another episode. But for them to sit there and able to do that with their studios and their directors and their actors, they took care of people. Now you get over to Disney, Marvel, and Scarlett Johansson. There was some kind of miscommunication there, and you hate to see it happen, because this is like the first time in a long while where this has really gone public. I think the only other time I can think of was when between Iron Man 1 and 2, when I believe it was Terrence Howard, who was originally Rhodey in the first movie, wanted to come back for the second one, but was asking a little too much as far as Marvel was willing to pay at the time, so they replaced him with John Cheadle in the second Iron Man movie. And again, you hate to see it happen. These are performers, but they are also business deals that happen behind the scenes, which make all this come together. So you have these people who have been part of this cinematic world. Putting these stories together takes years in the making. I mean, there was even rumors of Chris Evans possibly returning. They're going to pay him to come back because he was such a prominent character in the MCU. Same with Robert Downey Jr. There's a rumor that he might be coming back in some shape or form, whether it's a voice or live action back on camera. It's going to take something to have him come back, especially when you've already paid him so much in the past. They're not going to take a pay cut just because they're buddy. I mean, in certain cases that does happen. It's not unheard of. But they've already, raised the bar for themselves. You can damn well sure that Scarlett Johansson has worked her ass off to get to where she is now. She wants to get paid. I don't see a problem with this. Then again, I don't hold the purse strings or the checkbook for Disney. That's something that needs to be taken care of with their lawyers. Hopefully they're not going to be pains in the asses about it. You have a multi-billion-dollar company, I believe it is, at least for Disney. How many parks, how many studios, how many movies, how many IPs, merchandising alone, Jesus Christ. All that is going to be able to battle this actor in Scarlett Johansson, who only has a few $1 million to her name. I mean, everybody's saying, well, $20 million, you can put that towards her legal fees. Okay, it's not that easy. and you can damn well be sure that if you have to go to court for something, it's going to cost you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight a court battle. Well, now you've just upped the ante because these entities are making millions more, so you can damn well be sure that they're going to have to pay out a lot more for these lawyers and these groups and litigation and fees, and it gets fucking crazy when it comes to the numbers. So why even go that route? Well, you go that route because now if you want to set a precedent, if you want to stand up for yourself and for other actors, potentially other female actors, or other actors who are just being affected by this whole day and date and premiere access nonsense, that you want to make sure that everybody gets paid. This is not anything new when it comes to the world of entertainment. If there's a new way for... let's put it this way. Go back a little bit to around like 07, 08, when streaming and the idea of digital downloads was a new thing. How do you, parse that out? If somebody buys a new copy of, let's say Ocean's 11, there's a lot of different actors in there. How do you pay out the royalties for this new form or new format? Before, people would just buy them on VHS or DVD. Now you have a digital download. So who gets paid the different cut of this new pie, essentially? Entertainment lawyers get in, they say this, they say that. Eventually there's a strike, or people will say, we're not going to do this, we want to renegotiate, and then people have to go in. That's when the union or the guild goes in, and everybody has to say, okay, this is what we agree to. No, we don't want this. We want lower pay. We want better pay. Well, this is a battle that takes place behind closed doors. People who are, in certain cases, a much higher pay grade get to make these decisions. So who knows what's going to happen in this case? If it goes to court, if it gets settled in court, it's going to set a precedence if she wins. If she doesn't, it's going to suck, because it's going to be a big blow to her financially, and her reputation might be, for lack of better terms, fucked when it comes to Disney. I mean, I'm sure other studios will pick her up and they'll still, work with her, because she is Scarlett Johansson. She's a fantastic actor. And let's face it, I don't want to say it in a way that comes off as sexist, but she's a very attractive actor. So, a human being. So there's no way that she's not going to work again in the industry. It just may not be another Marvel movie, unfortunately. We'll see what happens. So, for anybody else who is trying to make this, a gender battle or an inequality battle, I mean, really, it just comes down to business dealings. And Disney should have done better by their actors to make things easier as far as everything is concerned, but they didn't. So now they're trying to they're doing a war of words right now, and how it plays out. If it goes settled out of court and she gets a huge payday, good for her, but that actually hurts the overall outcome for other people who are trying to benefit from what she's doing. And it's for a good cause. I do believe it is. And nobody was sitting there saying, oh, she's got millions of dollars anyway. Yeah, she's got millions of dollars because she's worked her ass off. She's gotten to that point. So I think she honestly deserves it. How she gets it, different story. So we'll see how that one plays out. And also the other thing about this is, it's going to come down really to the wording of the contract and the wording of how it's portrayed in the lawsuit. Because once they file and say, what are you filing for? And if they don't word it just right, if they don't bring up the right points in her defense as to why she believes that Disney is in breach of contract, it could fuck things up quite a bit. So legalities, or legal speak, could ultimately fuck this for the defense team. So let's hope. I'm sure she's got a defense team that's on their toes, minding their P's and Q's, because that's what you pay them for. But because of that, you've got to make sure how things are played out, because otherwise small technicalities can ruin any kind of filing or proceeding, and from there you just go back to square one and you're fucked. And that takes more money, more time. It can drag things out further and further. Robert Kirkman of the Walking Dead, he recently had a battle with AMC over royalties that were not paid out due to his contract. Like, he was expecting certain monies being paid to him, and AMC was like, "Oh no, we don't have this. We didn't reach that milestone." They had to do audits. They had to figure things out, and audits apparently are a normal occurrence in the world of entertainment, because sometimes there's what's called creative accounting. So some of the studios sometimes will say, "Oh, this is a fantastic movie. We made millions of dollars, and everybody was fantastic in the movie, and the behind the scenes, and the team, and the cast, whatever case is." But then when you ask them, "Well, okay, you made so much money. Where are the royalties?" "Oh, the movie never made an actual profit." And they'll hide different things in accounting, whether it be building for sets, certain crews, or catering, whatever the case is. They'll find a way to say, "Yeah, we made money, but all that stuff was paid out behind the scenes. So there's nothing left for royalty payments. There's nothing left for the director or for the producer, depending where you sit on the pay structure." So because of that, sometimes it gets a little fucking dicey in the world of Hollywood, and it gets really, really dirty. So when somebody says, "Oh, we're going to do an audit," it's not uncommon, because you want to find where that movie, or that money went. You hear these movies that Jimmy told me back in the day, like, if you get a movie that's $10 million, that's usually like a small budget movie. You get $10 million for a movie, That's $10 million for filming, shooting the movie. There's another like $10 million or not more for the advertising and trying to get the word out. So billboards, TV commercials, posters, whatever the case is. So there's more money. So you have to make an extra bit of money in the box office to try to offset the different costs. So when you see these movies come out, you're like, oh, the movie was a $50 million movie. So long as they make $60 million, they're in the green. Not so much. Usually the advertising and everything else, the other hidden costs, they pile up and you have to be able to make more money. So that's why when a movie comes out, they're like, oh, it made enough money for a green light. You know, they're going to make a sequel or another entry into that franchise. That's because they have an idea, a projection, whether it be domestic or global, where they're going to sit with as far as all that's concerned. But now I'm rambling as far as all this stuff is Hollywood and movies and money, and that just gets dirty, nasty, and nobody wants to talk about that. I want to talk about the stuff that really should be very important, and that's taking care of the actor who does all the performance. I mean, you get these people in front of the camera, in front of green screens or blue screens, whatever the case is nowadays, and you have them bring these comic book characters to life. Why would you treat one of them poorly in this sense? The words that were brought out by Disney and the studio, and I know everybody doesn't say, oh, they're the machine and the House of Mouse should be brought down. No, that's, again, yes, they are the keepers of the Marvel IPs at this point, but they also take care of the different actors and performers who do these. So all these people who sign on for multi-deals and say, I will do 5 pictures with you, I will do this character for how many iterations, whatever the case is. It was all going pretty well until this one. But again, we were not living in a pandemic previous to the release of some of these movies. So the past year and a half has gotten really crazy, really wonky, and could set new precedents in these cases, or precedents overall, as far as how they handle these movies. Theaters have already been upset at the way that certain studios or certain providers have been doing the movies. So the idea that before, again, you would have a movie in the theaters for about 3 to 6 months, but now you're having that cycle dwindle. So a movie, if it lasts 2 months, a month, depending on the release, I mean, that's it. Sometimes they just fade away, and then they go straight to video on demand or streaming, depending on how you get it. So whether you're lucky if you can get on HBO Max, Disney, Amazon, Hulu, whichever one, Netflix, and if you're already subscribing to it, great, it's free. But in the case of Amazon, you get certain movies that are quote-unquote included with Amazon Prime or your Prime membership, or you go on, and this has had to have happened to other people. You go onto Amazon, you search for a movie, you find the movie that you want, you click on it, and then it says rent it for $4. You're like, what the fuck? I'm paying already. Why do I have to rent an additional $4 movie? But that's the way it goes. They license these films, so they have them available for X amount of months or years, and then after a while it goes away, and then they just say, hey, if you want this movie, you have to pay a little extra. And really, $4 isn't that much. If you really want to see a movie, it's not going to break the bank. $30 for the premiere access. I get that they're newer movies, but considering you're charged $10 in the theaters, if not more, depending on where you go, $30 is a little steep, unless you're going to have friends pay into it. But then again, that's when Disney starts to lose out, because where you potentially could have made $40, $50 from friends, a small group going to the movies, you're getting $30 from a household or from a subscriber, and that's it. You're fucked. That's the one-time payment for that film or movie. And hopefully the next one that comes around, I believe Mulan was another one that was released for Disney through Premier Access. And there was another one. Yes, the new Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, the new Jungle Cruise movie, which was also based off of an attraction from Disney. Why didn't that one come up as far as contractual disputes? That's because The Rock will tell you that, first and foremost, he's a businessman. And he desperately wanted this movie to get made. He fought really hard to get Emily Blunt. There's a nice little story where he was sending her videos, asking her to take part in the movie and join in. And I don't doubt for a minute that once things got a little dicey in terms of day and date or theater only or streaming only, that they went back to the negotiating table and say, hey, look, if we're going to do this on Disney Plus Premier Access and everything else like this and that, because they were shooting under the confines of COVID restrictions, whereas Black Widow was not. Black Widow was done by the time that they were getting it ready for release back in 2020. Jungle Cruise was filmed during a pandemic. So that's the big difference between the two movies. With that in mind, they made negotiations with that involved. Or in that, again, in the contracts. So I don't doubt that Emily Blunt and The Rock said, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we're going to get paid. This is what we should probably adjust for the current state of affairs. And I mean, I don't want to make it come down to, well, The Rock is a male actor and Scarlett Johansson's a female actor. No, it doesn't come down to gender. It just comes down to negotiations and how things went and how things were at the time. When they made the contract for Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow, it was not believed, it was not imagined that there would be a pandemic at the time. When The Rock sat down and negotiated things were constantly changing, and I'm sure he said, hey, look, we're living in this special time in history. We need to make a little bit of an adjustment to the contract. I'm sure it went along those lines. I'm not saying that's specifically what happened. Who knows? But I'm going to leave this one open-ended, only because it's going to be quite some time. It's not going to happen anytime soon. It's not going to happen in the next few months. It's not going to happen a year from now. I'm sure the ramifications of this lawsuit and legal action are going to take quite some time, unless Disney finally says, hey, look, we fucked up. They're not going to say that publicly. I'm sure they're going to make some kind of a statement. I'm hoping that Kevin Feige can sit down with the higher-ups from Disney and say, hey, look, we need to come together, show a demonstration of unity, of togetherness as far as the MCU, the studios, the actors, and top Disney brass. Bring it all together. Let's have a big hug. Let's go out in the park wearing our masks, socially distanced, and say, we love each other. We're going to settle this together. No worries. We'll see what happens. Something along those lines, at least, in my dumb imagination. I figure that's what could and probably will happen. I don't think Disney wants to take this to court. I don't think they want to drag this one out any further. Again, because it hurts the brand at this point for the MCU. There are a lot of fans of the MCU that love it, but there's certain fans that get exhausted and jaded after a while. So this will just give them an excuse to jump off the MCU bandwagon or the Disney bandwagon. But let's face it, there are so many diehard fans of both that I don't think it's going to hurt them in the long run. But to mitigate any of that bad juju, so to speak, they will try to make things right. So it's going to take a little time. We'll see what happens. Again, we're going to leave it open-ended. We'll see what happens, and we'll get into that in a separate episode. Hopefully, I'll be able to tackle it in one of those, oh yeah, in other news, and just make it a quick 2-3 minute news piece as far as my reporting is concerned, and then move on from there. We'll see. But I think I've rambled on far enough for this one. Again, we're going to try to get some things down as far as scheduling and recording, and I'm just trying to make other things sync up a little bit better so I can sit down, record these comfortably, have time to edit my my long pauses, and hopefully can make things a little bit more presentable. I'm still working on my sound levels. Thank you for those who've been emailing me and saying that, you should do this, do that. I'm trying. This is a new piece of equipment still that I'm still trying to get used to. I'm still trying to get the whole setup where it's easy to do it and recreate a usable sound profile, I guess you can say. Is that good enough for you guys? Email me if it's not. Email rabblecast@gmail.com. If you have any news, if you want to give any tips, if you want to just talk, email me and let me know what's going on. I'm sure you're going to hear it all in the intro. So again, I'm going to stop. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. We are the Rabblecast.